February 1974, Lubang Island, Philippines. I crouch in the darkness beneath a canopy of mahogany trees, my Arisaka Type 99 rifle pressed against my chest. My knuckles ache from gripping it for the past 3 hours. Through the undergrowth, I can see their campfire. Filipino search party, 12 men, maybe more. They're careless, loud, speaking Tagalog mixed with what sounds like English. In exactly 4 minutes, when the moon disappears behind the clouds, we will move closer. We will observe. We will wait for them to make a mistake. My partner, Kozuka, whispers coordinates. 30 meters, 11 o'clock. I nod. The rifle's bolt slides silently. We've done this 1,000 times. Survive, evade, continue the mission. The war may look different now, 1974 instead of 1944, but our orders remain unchanged. They don't know we're here. They think this jungle is empty. In 4 minutes, they're about to discover that the Imperial Japanese Army never surrendered Lubang Island. We're still here, still fighting, still obeying the last command we received 30 years ago. We would unleash hell if necessary. But tonight, like every night for 10,585 nights before this one, we simply vanish back into the darkness. My name is Second Lieutenant Hiroo Onoda, Imperial Japanese Army Intelligence, Sugi 3952, Nakano School graduate. People often ask me what it was like to spend 29 years fighting a war that ended in 1945. They want heroic stories, philosophical insights, some profound truth about duty and sacrifice. The truth is, we were too busy trying not to die to think about making history. Every bullet we carried, we had maybe 40 rounds left by 1960, represented the difference between survival and capture. Every rice grain stolen from Filipino farms meant one more day we could continue our mission. We weren't thinking about how this would look in history books. We were thinking about staying alive until Japanese forces returned. Our mission was clear. Disrupt enemy communications, destroy the airfield, prevent Allied use of Lubang Island as a staging base for the invasion of Japan. Lieutenant Taniguchi, my commanding officer, gave me the order personally in December 1944. You will hold Lubang until the Imperial Army returns. That may be 1 year, that may be 10 years. You will not surrender, you will not commit suicide, you will continue the mission. Every night in that jungle, I thought about my parents in Kainan, Wakayama Prefecture, about the telegram they would receive if I failed. Your son failed to complete his mission. That was worse than death. That was unacceptable. To understand how one Japanese soldier could remain hidden for 29 years on a small Filipino island, you need to understand how the Imperial Japanese Army trained its intelligence officers and how completely we believed in our mission. By late 1944, Japan was losing. We knew it, even if we couldn't say it out loud. The Philippines were falling. MacArthur had returned. American forces were island-hopping toward the home islands with overwhelming superiority. Aircraft carriers, battleships, thousands of planes, unlimited supplies. Traditional Japanese defense tactics, banzai charges, fighting to the last man, were failing catastrophically. Saipan fell in July 1944. 30,000 Japanese soldiers died, including mass civilian suicides. Iwo Jima would fall in March 1945, 18,000 more dead. These weren't defeats, they were annihilations. The Imperial Army needed a new approach, guerrilla warfare. Soldiers trained not to die gloriously, but to survive indefinitely. To make every occupied territory so costly, so dangerous, that American forces would negotiate rather than invade Japan itself. Enter the Nakano School, the Imperial Army's intelligence and guerrilla warfare training center. We learned survival, sabotage, codes, resistance operations. We were trained to think independently, to survive alone for years if necessary, to never surrender, even if ordered to by what appeared to be superior officers. That training saved my life. It also trapped me in a war that ended 3 decades before I stopped fighting it. I first saw Nakano School in November 1944 at Nakano, Tokyo. I was 22 years old, selected from thousands of candidates for intelligence training. The school's reputation was legendary. Graduates operated behind enemy lines in China, Southeast Asia, the Pacific. Many never returned. The instructors were veterans of campaigns in Manchuria and China. Hard men who'd survived when others hadn't. They taught us survival, which plants were edible, how to purify water, how to treat wounds with jungle materials. They taught us sabotage, destroying bridges with minimal explosives, disabling vehicles, cutting communication lines. But most importantly, they taught us psychological resilience. You will be alone, our instructor Major Yoshimi told us. You will receive contradictory information. You will hear that Japan has surrendered. You will see newspapers claiming the emperor has announced defeat. These are enemy psychological operations. Your mission continues until your commanding officer personally relieves you with the proper authentication codes. Our greatest weapons weren't the Arisaka rifle or the grenades we carried. They were our training, our discipline, and our absolute conviction that the mission mattered more than our lives. I graduated Nakano School in December 1944. By December 26th, I was on a transport to the Philippines, arriving at Lubang Island on December 30th, 1944. Lubang Island, 125 square kilometers of jungle, mountains, and coastline. Population, approximately 10,000 Filipinos, mostly farmers and fishermen. Strategic value, airfield that could support fighter aircraft, harbor that could serve as small vessels, position controlling approaches to Manila Bay. Lieutenant Taniguchi commanded our small unit, myself, Corporal Shimada, Private First Class Kozuka, and Private Akatsu. 4 men. The rest of the garrison, approximately 200 soldiers, were regular Army infantry, not intelligence trained. Our mission was specific. Destroy the airfield, destroy the harbor facilities, conduct guerrilla operations to deny the island to American forces, hold until relieved.
February 28, 1945. American forces invaded Lubang. The main garrison fought for 3 days. Then they surrendered or were killed. We 4, Nakano-trained, did not surrender. We withdrew into the mountains and began our real mission. Our first operation failed catastrophically. We attempted to destroy fuel supplies at the harbor using improvised explosives, but we miscalculated the guard schedule. Corporal Shimada was nearly captured. We retreated empty-handed, exhausted, learning a brutal lesson. Intelligence was everything. Timing was everything. One mistake meant death or capture. We shifted tactics. Instead of ambitious sabotage, we focused on survival and observation. We mapped American movements. We recorded aircraft types and frequencies. We prepared intelligence reports for the Japanese forces we believed would return. The war ended August 15, 1945. We didn't know. We were in the mountains, miles from any radio, isolated from all communication. When Filipino civilians began returning to their farms, we assumed this was post-invasion normalization. In October 1945, we found a leaflet dropped by American aircraft. The war has ended. Japan has surrendered. All Japanese soldiers must report to Allied forces immediately. We burned it. Obviously, enemy propaganda. In 1946, more leaflets. Newspapers showing the emperor in civilian clothes. Photographs of Tokyo rebuilding. We analyzed them carefully. Conclusion: sophisticated psychological warfare. The Americans wanted us to surrender. That proved our mission was still important. Private Akatsu cracked first. In September 1949, after 4 years in the jungle, he walked out and surrendered to Filipino authorities. We watched him go. Shimada, Kozuka, and I concluded he'd been broken by American psychological warfare. We stayed. The years blurred. 1950, 1955, 1960. Shimada was killed in a firefight with Filipino police in 1954. We thought they were American-backed enemy forces. Kozuka and I continued alone. 2 men, maintaining the mission, waiting for Japanese forces to return. We survived by stealing rice from farms, fishing in remote streams, hunting wild animals. We avoided contact with anyone. We moved camps every few weeks. We maintained our weapons obsessively. By 1970, my Arasaka was 30 years old, held together with wire and improvised parts, but still functional. The outside world occasionally intruded. Search parties appeared in the jungle. They called our names. They brought letters from our families. They brought Japanese newspapers. They played recordings of our relatives begging us to come home. All obvious tricks. In intelligence training, we'd learned the enemy will use your family against you. They'll forge documents. They'll hire actors. We couldn't trust anyone until properly relieved by our commanding officer with the correct authentication codes. In 1972, Kazuka was killed by Filipino police. After 27 years, I was alone. I was 50 years old. I'd spent more of my life in the jungle than in civilization. I knew every ridge, every stream, every cave on Lubang Island. I could navigate it blindfolded. But I was alone for the first time since 1944. I continued the mission. What else could I do? February 1974. A young Japanese explorer named Norio Suzuki came to Lubang Island specifically to find me. Not as part of an official search, he was 24 years old, traveling the world, looking for Lieutenant Onoda, a panda, and the abominable snowman in that order. He found me in the jungle, called out, "Onoda-san, I'm Japanese. I'm here to bring you home." I kept him in my rifle sights, but I didn't shoot. Something about him seemed genuine, non-threatening, curious rather than hostile. We talked. He told me the war ended in 1945. Japan was now peaceful, prosperous, allied with America. The emperor was still alive. My family was waiting for me. I didn't believe him, but I made an offer. Bring me my commanding officer. Have him relieve me of my orders properly. Then I'll surrender. Suzuki returned to Japan, found Major Taniguchi, my former commanding officer, now 60 years old, a bookseller in Wakayama, convinced him to return to Lubang. March 9, 1974. Major Taniguchi walked into the jungle in his civilian suit, carrying a paper with official orders. He saluted me. I saluted him back, the first time I'd saluted a superior officer in 29 years. He read the orders. Second Lieutenant Onoda, by order of the Imperial Japanese Army, you are hereby relieved of all combat duties on Lubang Island. The war has ended. You have completed your mission with honor. You are ordered to surrender your weapons and return to Japan immediately. I handed him my rifle. It was over. I emerged from the jungle March 10, 1974. I was 52 years old. I'd been in the jungle for 29 years and 39 days. I wore my tattered Imperial Army uniform, carried my Arasaka rifle, sword, hand grenades, ammunition, all meticulously maintained despite 3 decades of tropical humidity. The world had changed completely. Japan was the world's second-largest economy. Tokyo was a gleaming modern city. The emperor had renounced his divinity. America was an ally. Everything I'd fought for, Imperial Japan, the Greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere, the warrior code that said surrender was worse than death, it was all gone. Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos pardoned me for the estimated 30 Filipinos I'd killed during my guerrilla campaign. I returned to Japan as a celebrity, the last Japanese soldier to surrender, the man who'd faithfully followed orders for 29 years. But I struggled with the modern world. The Japan I returned to wasn't the Japan I'd left. Young people had long hair, listened to Western music, didn't care about duty or honor or sacrifice. They thought I was a relic, a curiosity, a man who'd wasted his life on a war that ended before he stopped fighting. Maybe they were right. I spent the next 40 years trying to understand what happened to me, why I stayed when I should have left, why I believed when I should have doubted, why I followed orders that no longer made sense. The answer is complicated. I was trained too well. The Nakano School taught me to distrust everything, to maintain the mission despite contradictory information, to never surrender. That training kept me alive.
It also imprisoned me. But I never regretted my service. I did my duty as I understood it. I followed my orders. I maintained discipline when others broke. That matters, even if the war I fought ended 29 years before I stopped fighting. I returned to Lubang Island several times after 1974, apologized to Filipino families affected by my actions, donated money for schools, tried to make amends for the people I'd killed during those decades. In Japan, I became a survival instructor, teaching young people the skills that kept me alive for 29 years. I wrote books, gave lectures, tried to explain what duty meant to a generation that didn't understand it. I died January 16, 2014, at age 91. 69 years after the war ended, 40 years after I surrendered. People ask me, was it worth it? 29 years in the jungle, fighting a war that ended in 1945. I don't know how to answer that. I did what I was trained to do. I followed my orders. I completed my mission, even if that mission stopped making sense in August 1945. What I learned in those 29 years: survival is a skill, but it's also a prison. Discipline can keep you alive, but it can also keep you trapped. Duty without context becomes obsession. The jungle taught me to survive on nothing. The jungle also taught me that surviving isn't the same as living. I remember the darkness beneath those mahogany trees, the weight of the Arisaka rifle, the constant vigilance, the absolute conviction that I was doing the right thing. I remember all of it, every day, every night. 30 years of war that didn't need to be fought. But I remember something else, too. The moment Major Taniguchi relieved me of duty. The moment the war finally ended. The moment I could finally stop fighting. That moment made the previous 29 years worth surviving. The Filipinos were stunned by my emergence from the jungle in 1974 because they thought all Japanese soldiers had left Lubang in 1945. They thought the war was over. They thought no one could survive 3 decades in the jungle alone, still fighting, still believing, still obeying orders from a war that ended before most of them were born. They were wrong. By the time they understood, by the time anyone understood, I'd already spent 10,585 days in the darkness, waiting for orders that would never come from an empire that no longer existed. The shadows belonged to me. The jungle was my command post. The mission was eternal. Until, suddenly, it wasn't. And then I had to learn to live in a world I no longer understood, fighting a peace I never trained for, obeying orders that now said, rest. The war ended August 15, 1945. I surrendered March 10, 1974. The difference between those dates is 10,434 days. That's how long it takes for duty to become obsolete. That's how long it takes for a soldier to realize the war is over. That's how long it takes to finally come home.